3 worst and 4 best Honda engines you can actually own. Honda has a reputation for building engines that seem almost indestructible, but not every Honda engine deserves that praise. Some hide serious flaws beneath that reliable badge, developing problems that slowly turn ownership into a nightmare. Some engines will quietly carry you past 300,000 miles with nothing more than routine maintenance. Others? They break early, fail often, and leave you dealing with costly repairs before you even hit 6 figures. In this breakdown, we are diving into the 3 worst and 4 best Honda engines you can actually own. Let's get started with the engines you should avoid at all costs. Make sure you stick around to the end, because number 1 might completely change how you see Honda reliability. Number 3, Honda 1.5-liter turbo, L15B7. This is the engine that doesn't explode right away. It doesn't give you that one dramatic failure you can point to. No. This one works differently. It erodes itself slowly, quietly, like something breaking down from the inside while everything looks fine on the surface. The Honda 1.5-liter turbo was designed to be efficient, modern, and powerful for its size, and on a test drive it delivers. Smooth acceleration, great fuel economy, no obvious warning signs. However, a known issue has always followed this engine: oil dilution. Here is what that really means in the real world. You check your oil one morning, expecting the usual dark fluid. Instead, it smells like gasoline. The level is higher than it should be. That's fuel leaking into your oil, thinning it out until it can't properly protect the engine anymore. And when oil stops doing its job, everything inside starts wearing faster. Bearings, pistons, cylinder walls. It soon becomes a countdown. What makes this worse is when it happens. Often in colder climates, during short trips, exactly how many people drive daily. That's what makes this engine dangerous. And by the time you realize what's happening, you are choosing how much it's going to cost you. Number 2, Honda 3.5-liter V6 with VCM. If the last engine was a slow poison, this one is something else entirely. It fights against itself. On the surface, the Honda 3.5-liter V6 with VCM feels like a win. Strong acceleration and smooth highway cruising. The kind of power that makes the car feel effortless. But buried inside is a system designed to shut parts of the engine off to save fuel, something known as variable cylinder management. And that's where things start to go wrong. Imagine an engine constantly switching between breathing fully and holding its breath. Cylinders firing, then not firing, then firing again. Over time, that inconsistency creates imbalance. Heat builds unevenly. Oil moves where it shouldn't. And slowly, parts begin to wear in ways they were never meant to. Owners start noticing it in small ways. A slight vibration at highway speeds. A hesitation that wasn't there before. Then comes the oil consumption. Spark plugs foul earlier than expected. Misfires creep in. Eventually, the vibration worsens. Engine mounts wear out prematurely. The car that once felt smooth now feels unsettled, like something underneath is coming apart. The repair bill? New mounts, plugs, possibly piston rings work, easily pushing into the $2,000 to $4,000 range. Unlike the last engine, this one gives you a chance to fight back. It's not doomed from the start, but it demands attention. Ignore it and it slowly unravels. Manage it and it can last. Still, the fact remains. An engine shouldn't need a workaround to survive long term. Number 1. Honda 1.0-liter turbo, P10A. After everything we have just seen, you would expect the worst of the worst to end in total destruction. But this one doesn't collapse the same way. It's not as quietly corrosive as the 1.5-liter turbo, and it doesn't actively fight itself like the V6 with VCM. Instead, the Honda 1.0-liter turbo, P10A, survives, but at a cost that shows up in a different form. This engine was built for one purpose: maximum efficiency from minimum size. A tiny 3-cylinder paired with a turbo, squeezing out just enough power to keep things moving. On paper, it sounds smart with lower fuel bills, smaller emissions, and a modern solution. But in reality, it's an engine that's constantly being pushed near its limit. Imagine driving on a normal day. Light traffic and steady throttle feels fine. Now add weight, passengers, cargo, turn on the AC under a hot sun. Suddenly, that tiny engine has to work harder, and harder, and harder. The turbo spools more, heat builds faster, and internal stress becomes a daily routine instead of an occasional demand. This is where the difference shows. Compared to number 2, this engine doesn't suffer from a flawed system you can disable. There's no $100 fix to stabilize it. What you get is what you live with. But unlike number 3, it doesn't slowly contaminate itself from within either. It simply wears faster because it's always working overtime. After everything we have just gone through, you start to expect the worst. You start to assume every modern engine is just one flaw away from collapse. And then you meet one of the best Honda engines ever, the Honda K20. 4. Honda K20. This is where the pattern breaks. The K20 doesn't rely on fragile systems or push-to-the-limit design. It doesn't need to juggle efficiency tricks or survive constant stress. The Honda K20 is built with a kind of mechanical honesty that feels almost out of place now. Start it cold, let it idle, drive it hard, let it sit, and repeat that cycle for years. Even when belts age and fluids get dirty, normal wear happens. But the core of the engine? It stays intact, like it's insulated from the slow decay affecting everything else around it. Think about what that actually means over time. Instead of chasing problems, you are just maintaining motion. A basic oil change in your driveway of about $50 in 30 minutes keeps things moving, instead of handing over $150 to $200 every few months just to stay ahead of potential issues. There is no underlying flaw you are trying to manage, no growing list of things waiting to fail. Compared to the worst engines, this one doesn't feel like it's headed toward an endpoint. There is no sense that something expensive is being built behind the scenes. It feels stable and predictable in a way that modern engines rarely are, almost like it's detached from the usual timeline. Because while other engines age in visible, measurable ways, this one just keeps going, unaffected, like it missed the part where it's supposed to wear out. But even this isn't the peak. Because as solid as the K20 is, what comes next refines it into something even harder to kill. 3. Honda J35 V6. The K20 proved that it is possible for an engine to survive without drama, but it's still a smaller, high-revving 4-cylinder. It wins through balance and simplicity. The Honda J35 V6 takes a different path. This is strength by design. No fragile tricks, no constant strain, and no system quietly working against itself like the VCM versions we talked about earlier. This is what that engine should have been from the start, with powerful, consistent, and brutally dependable. Press the throttle and it moves without hesitation. Load the vehicle with passengers, luggage, real-world weight. It doesn't struggle like the smaller turbo engines. It doesn't feel like it's fighting to keep up. It just works. Imagine a long highway stretch. Heat building outside, AC running, vehicle fully loaded. Smaller turbo engines start to feel strained at this moment with gear hunting, slight lag, rising engine noise. The J35 doesn't react emotionally to load. The revs rise slightly then settle. No drama, no visible struggle, just steady forward motion, like the weight simply doesn't matter. Then there's the maintenance reality behind that calm surface. A timing belt service arrives eventually. At a professional shop, that moment turns into a $700 to $1,200 bill. Not because the engine is fragile, but because it is designed properly enough that preventative maintenance is non-negotiable. But the contrast appears when it's handled differently. Parts ordered in advance around $250 to $350 total. A weekend, basic tools, patience. The job doesn't feel like damage control. It feels like resetting something that was always predictable. That's the real nature of this engine. It places them in the open, spaced out, visible, manageable. Compared to the K20, it sacrifices some simplicity for raw capability. Compared to everything on the worst list, it feels almost overbuilt, like it was designed with real-world punishment already accounted for. And yet, even this level of strength isn't the ceiling. Number 2. Honda F23. While the J35 gave strength and real-world power, it still lives in a world of modern maintenance with timing belts, scheduled services, costs that can sneak up if you are not ready. The Honda F23 comes from a different era entirely. This is what an engine looks like before complexity took over. No turbo, no cylinder deactivation, and no systems quietly working in the background. Just metal, fuel, air, and time. And what makes it unsettling in its own way is how little it asks for in return. Instead of complex dependency chains, it reacts only to the basics. What's interesting is how it handles time itself. Where newer engines tend to degrade in visible patterns, this engine tends to fade in a much more gradual, almost indifferent way. It becomes less about fixing problems and more about removing barriers to keep it running longer. A warn sensor doesn't always stop it. A delayed service doesn't immediately end it. Even aging components often result in reduced efficiency rather than total collapse. It absorbs imperfections instead of reacting to them violently. Compared to the J35, it sacrifices power, refinement, and modern drivability. It won't feel strong under load, and it won't deliver the smoothness newer engines aim for. But in return, it offers something harder to measure: a lack of complexity that removes most of the ways things can go wrong. 1. Honda K24. The F23 showed what happens when an engine is stripped down to its essentials with mechanical honesty that refuses to quit. But it also came with limits. Older design, lower output, and a sense that it belonged to a simpler time rather than a demanding modern world. The Honda K24 takes that foundation and pushes it further without breaking it. More power, but not at the cost of stability. Better efficiency, but not through fragile systems waiting to fail. It feels modern in every way that matters, but still grounded enough to avoid the complexity that destroys long-term reliability in other engines. The response is immediate, clean, controlled. It doesn't feel like it's working harder than it should, even when the load increases. Highway driving, stop-and-go traffic, long-distance travel. Meanwhile, a neglected oil change doesn't immediately spiral into disaster. A missed service doesn't trigger instant failure. Instead, the engine continues operating within a wide margin of tolerance, absorbing imperfections that would destabilize more fragile designs. At the same time, proper maintenance feels like reinforcement. Basic oil and filter changes around $40 to $60 in a driveway setup, extend what is already an unusually long lifespan. Even when pushed hard, it doesn't collapse under pressure the way smaller, more complex engines eventually do. What makes it different is its consistency under changing conditions. Heat, mileage, workload, time, none of it creates sudden instability. It simply accumulates slowly, predictably, without surprise failure points emerging in the dark. Compared to the F23, it delivers more capability without sacrificing simplicity. Compared to everything below it on this list, it minimizes them by design. And that's what makes it the best of the best.